morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Maria Tranquilli, and I'm a program manager at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. For those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center is a nonprofit dedicated to enabling entrepreneurs from all over the world to realize their maximum potentials and grow. We will open up for live Q&A at the end of this event, and you'll also be able to submit your questions in the chat function throughout this event. None of what we could do would be possible without the amazing support of our sponsors. We're humbled by their contributions. And during these unique times, we are curious about how sentiment is among the entrepreneurs and people like you that we are working with in our community. We like to start by taking a poll to let us know how you are feeling about your business right now. So we have 3 polls. How are you currently feeling? Are you feeling fearful, anxious? Are you surviving, or are you optimistic? Please let us know here in this poll. Thank you all for submitting. We are, it looks like around 60% optimistic, 40% anxious. Good to know. This is a great topic then for all of us today. The second poll, what type of entrepreneur are you? Are you an entrepreneur that's currently in business? Are you an aspiring entrepreneur, or perhaps you hold a different position in your company? Please let us know. It looks as though we have lots of entrepreneurs in business with us today and some aspiring entrepreneurs as well. And then finally, what is keeping you up at night? Is it finances, sales, marketing, scaling, pivoting your team, or just surviving? Thank you all for filling those out. It looks like we have a tie between marketing and surviving currently. Well, without further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Jamie Greenwood. Jamie, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to those who have been with us these last few sessions, and welcome to any new people. You are not late. You are right on time. Just kind of adjusting my camera. I am thrilled to see all of you here today. And today's topic, as we know, the larger theme is adaptive resilience for leaders in an ever-changing world. And today's topic is specifically about compassion. We titled it Building the Muscle, right? And one of the ways in which we build resilience is by practicing self-compassion. And we're going to get into what that is, what that looks like, how we break it down, and how we bring it into our lives to not only make us feel better, but to also see it kind of spread out into our world, whether that's into our teams, our businesses, our partnering, our parenting, everywhere. Because it really does, self-compassion is this incredible thing that once we start practicing it, you begin, it's like a stream that then breaks off in different directions, and you begin to see it flow in many different areas of your life. And self-compassion is something that is, whenever I run my power circles, my resilience circles, self-compassion is something that we work on a lot. And it's the thing that so many of us struggle with and have a true, well, dare I say, a resistance to. We just have a resistance to it. And so before I tell you why that is, before I tell you, I'd love to hear, when you think about self-compassion. And so self-compassion is, for those of us that are new to this tool, it is self-kindness in action. It is understanding and acknowledgement for what we are experiencing in any particular moment without judgment, right? It's holding our experience and our feelings with loving kindness and without judgment. And, you know, of course, we could do a whole other segment on just judgment and how we work with judgment and all the ways in which judgment keeps us from self-compassion. But for now, and I'm going to be asking questions throughout this. This is going to be more of a conversation than a lecture. We're going to be kind of all in this together. And so I'm going to be asking questions throughout, and I'd love to have you answer either in the chat box, or if you feel brave, you can unmute yourself and answer that way. But what I would like to know is, when you think about self-compassion, from it, or what has kept you from it in the past? And I'll give you a few examples from my clients that I have seen over time. But as I do give you some examples, I would love you in the chat box to write, what keeps you from self-compassion? I had one client who ran a very big multi-employee architecture firm, and we were talking about self-compassion, and she's like, I actually can't cut myself a break, because if I do, I will lose my edge. She was very attached to this idea that beating herself up and being critical of herself and being hard on herself was why she was successful in business. And so we spent a lot of time like really pulling on that string and pulling on the idea that we are only as successful as how hard we honor on ourselves, right? And often what's underneath that belief is that we are lazy. But I can promise you that anyone who is on this call is far from lazy. Anyone who would dare to throw themselves into the entrepreneurial ring is far from lazy. So if that's a piece of it for you, that's incredible information of, you know, I'm worried that I'm lazy, and if I don't kick my own ass all the time, I won't get anywhere. That is the number one reason I've seen in my practice as to why people struggle with self-compassion. I'm going to read a few things here. I think it was how I was raised and schooled. Yes. Being hard on ourselves was considered the way to raise children, and any other way would be spoiling. Yeah. I thank you so much for sharing that, Sarah. The idea that we don't want to spoil children, and we ourselves, like, we almost like, I mean, I talk to my clients every single day about self-care and our resistance to self-care. And often it is, I don't want to be spoiled. I can't, I don't deserve it, right? And there is that piece in parenting as well. Yep, Susan also said upbringing, parents telling us to complain and just deal with it. Professional grooming, bosses telling workers that if you complain, you're out. This is so real. It's so real. And so we've just, thank you. I've learned to just shut up and deal with whatever it is. So this is thank you for sharing that, Susan. This is a really interesting piece here of what, depending on who our boss is, what we are allowed to bring to work versus what we can allow to happen within ourselves. Often when we are shut down by a boss, we then internally shut ourselves down. And so what this work and what this topic is all about is that in those moments of being shut down by a boss or a coworker or a partner or a 3-year-old, you don't shut yourself down, right? That instead of, when you are told to just shut up and deal with it, you tell yourself also to shut up and deal with it. Instead, you can create space for yourself. You can create an honoring for yourself to feel whatever it is that's coming up, which then in turn offers the truer resilience that we think we get when we tell ourselves to just shut up and deal with it. Okay. Yeah, definitely no complaining. Peer pressure to also play a part. Yeah, this idea of expectations, right? How people expect us to be and how people expect us to act. The thing that I love about self-compassion, especially if we are kind of, it's a lot of inner work. So for those of us that are shy in kind of changing how we are perceived at work, right? Often pushing our leadership edge is kind of changing the expectations that people have put on us or that we've put on ourselves. If we're not ready to do that, what I love about self-compassion is that it's a lot of inner work. And just by doing the inner work, you begin to shift what's being displayed on the outside. So you don't have to work as hard to like force anything. Lola just wrote, it's also a matter of how much we value ourselves. Yeah, and also being a company girl. I haven't heard that phrase in a long time. But yeah, like just like being one of the team, not standing out, not pulling attention towards yourself. And it's interesting that we've wrapped all of these ideas around being a complainer, being spoiled, not being loyal to the company, that we've connected that to self-compassion, right? That like somehow, if we are being a good employee, we can't also be kind to ourselves. It's an interesting little thing that we've done here that I really am excited to kind of pull apart and change, because, and I'm going to get into some of the data here, but study after study after study shows, and you know, this is recent science because we've really only been studying self-compassion in the workplace for, I don't know, about 10 years, 15 years. But it actually does help employees become better employees and help leaders become better leaders. That the inner critic, or I think I might have shared this with you all who were on the first call, what I like to call the itty bitty shitty committee. There's not, because I don't know about you guys, but I don't just have one inner critic. I've got a committee. They have a boardroom. It's a whole thing. And so we often think that our inner critic is good for us, or your itty bitty shitty committee is good for you. And in some ways it is, but the data really shows that level of self-criticism and self-flagellation only gets you so far. And then at some point, you just get stuck. You just get stuck. Whereas with self-compassion, it's like you are like constantly filling your well so that when you hit a stumbling block, there is something to draw on. Whereas when you hit a stumbling block and you're drawing on your inner critic, there's really nothing there. There's nothing there that the inner critic can offer you that makes you feel strong and centered and ready to move forward. Okay, are there any questions about anything I have been saying? We will get into this next piece, but I think it's really important to begin to get so clear on our blocks to self-compassion. Because whenever we want to move forward with a new tool, we have to foresee what's in our way, right? And so whether that's judgment or the fear of being lazy or not being a spoiled person or being an ungrateful employee, whatever narrative you've got going, get really close to it. Get clear that like, okay, this actually is a stumbling block. This actually is something that is keeping me from how I want to feel in my everyday life. Steve just wrote, no, that made me laugh out loud, the itty bitty shitty committee. I know, I love it. I love it. I love that phrase. But it's be very helpful. Because if you don't have a sense of humor about this stuff, it's going to get dark real soon. So, all right. I want to get into the data here because many of us are data driven and we like the science behind things. So as I said, for about 10 or 15 years, self-compassion has been studied in terms of business and productivity. And what they have found is that really to get the best results out of yourself and employees, self-kindness, and then the kindness that you offer to yourself kind of resonates with you and then emanates out, is really imperative for team building and team productivity. I'm just going to throw some things at you now, just, to make it feel scientific. But a 2011 study from the University of California showed that subjects that spent more time studying for a difficult test following an initial failure did better when they practiced self-compassion. It increased their motivation. That is, the people who didn't do well on a test, who were kind to themselves after failing, did better the next time than the people who beat themselves up for failing and then attempted to take the test again. Self-compassion has been shown to boost happiness. Again and again, researchers are finding that it is linked to optimism, wisdom, personal initiative, and curiosity. That the self-compassion, I talk a lot about ways to create space in our system, right? Last session, we talked about conditioned tendencies, things that make us feel kind of locked down, and then we offer a knee-jerk reaction. And what self-compassion does is it offers space, right? It provides space and it provides breadth and depth so we can choose how we want to respond from a place of strength and integrity versus from a place of fight, flight, freeze, or appease. Self-compassion has been shown again and again to enhance self-worth. People just feel better about themselves and are able to hold what they see as imperfections or inadequacies or failures much more lightly. And that doesn't mean that they don't care about these imperfections or failures, is that there's a level of acceptance of them. And we're going to get into kind of what common humanity, the connection between common humanity and self-compassion is a little bit later. But this idea that we all fail, we all are imperfect. And when we can allow that to be, we have a greater sense of self-worth. And ultimately, it helps with resilience. The kinder we are in moments of stress, the quicker we bounce back. And that's ultimately what resilience is. How quickly you can get back up after you fall down. And self-compassion again and again, it's almost, I like to think about it as like a trampoline at the bottom of a dark pit. It's like you fall into the dark pit, and if you don't have self-compassion, you're just like stuck in the dark pit and you're trying to figure out how to get out. But if self-compassion is there, when you fall into the pit, it's there and it like helps you like bounce back up and bounce out of that pit more quickly. So if that visual is helpful, please use it. I like to think about it that way. So we've talked a bit about, why we reject self-compassion and also what self-compassion can offer us. There's also different kinds of self-compassion. Dr. Kristen Neff, who has done most of the research on self-compassion and connection to productivity and resilience, her most recent book talks about the different types of self-compassion, that there is a yin and a yang of self-compassion. So what is that? So oftentimes people shy away from self-compassion because they think it's too soft. They think it's like, I'm trying to use words that aren't too aggressive. They consider it to be babyish or weak or soft, or, this is why I have such a hard time with the language of like soft skills. Often soft skills like self-compassion are really hard to master. But they equate self-compassion with a softness. And especially for those of us on this call who are entrepreneurs, we don't want to be soft. We want to be hard driving. We want to move forward fast. We want to be able to pivot and be resilient and be quick thinkers. And the idea of being soft and self-compassionate doesn't really seem to have a place, right? But what Dr. Kristen Neff talks about is that certainly that is one very important piece of self-compassion, that soft piece of self-kindness, right? Love, understanding, acknowledgement. But then there's also the yang piece, which the way that yin and yang are from Chinese medicine, and the yin is kind of a lighter, more uplifting sensibility, whereas yang is like strong and more grounded, a more grounded sensibility. And the yang of self-compassion is like the strength of a mother bear. It's the for those of you who have any problem with language, you can do earmuffs. It's the don't fuck with me. it's the don't mess with me type of self-compassion. It's the self-compassion that offers you the bravery to say what's true. It's the self-compassion that offers you the strength to say the unpopular thing in a meeting, but it's the thing that needs to be said, right? It's the type of self-compassion that offers you the ability to lay a boundary and hold it. This is actually self-compassion. We don't think about it as self-compassion. We think about it as strength or as courage or as agency or as, setting firm boundaries, but really it's self-compassion because it is a form of self-care. It is a form of self-love. When you say, no, that's not okay. No, I'm not able to do that thing. Thank you for thinking of me, but my plate is already full. Let's find someone else to do that. That is self-compassion, but it requires a lot of strength and a lot of power to do it. So I love offering these two sides of self-compassion because, especially for those of us, again, that really want to be or want to consider or like to consider ourselves to be the strong, driven, entrepreneurial type, we can really get behind this idea of yang self-compassion because it feels juicy and good. We also want to remember that we also need the yin piece, the soft piece, because that's the piece that helps us slow down and even sense into where we might be needing self-compassion. Lola just wrote, I agree. We want and need to be agents of change. Yes. And we connect like the idea of agents of change or the language of agents of change to forward motion and quickness. But really we are only as fast or only as quick as kind of the ways in which we are filling our cup. And if we are never filling our cup, especially with something like self-compassion, eventually we run out of steam, we run out of gas, and then we're just cranky. I would love to hear how this is all landing. As I'm talking about the yin and yang of self-compassion, how does this help you maybe accept self-compassion better, especially for those of us that are resistant to it? How does this kind of separating it out help in allowing you to bring more self-compassion into your life? And again, if anyone wants to answer, you can unmute yourself. You can be brave. Or if you have a question, again, this is more of a conversation. So I'd love to hear any questions that you all have about this. Yeah, Deborah just wrote, the understanding allows for permission. Yeah, that's a really good word here. Like, what permission do you need to be self-compassionate? What part of you right now is up in arms and is like, nope, I don't want this. I don't want any of this. Like, what does that part of you need? What does that part of you need to know so that it can relax and offer yourself permission to experience self-compassion, which is what we're going to get into next. Yes.
So I want to tie into the comment that Deborah made, and that is allows for permission. And I think a lot of times we don't give ourselves permission, if you will. We wait for other people to give us permission. And, I wrote in the chat earlier that one of the reasons I don't engage in self-compassion is because my parents, would repeat those phrases, there are children starving in different parts of the world. You have a roof over your head, and I didn't realize at the time that, and I know they really, really meant well. They were trying to say, it's okay, it's okay, honey, don't worry, buck up, little cowboys and cowgirls, but they were really these micro kind of, I don't want to say micro, I don't even want to go there. It was the micro, I was going to say microaggression, but my parents were not aggressive. So it was these micro messages that didn't allow you permission to be human, to have emotions, and I'm still feeling that now when, for example, I have food right now. I have a roof over my head. I have amazing opportunity and I'm talking to people from all over the world in this incredible conference, life is good, it's fantastic. Yet I find at times if I say something, if I express an emotion like, I'm frustrated or I'm annoyed or I'm even just a physical being, I'm exhausted. People, even my own husband will say, well, how'd you like to be so-and-so? What are they going through? Like, I know, but my feeling and my being right now is not going to affect them. I mean, what I'm feeling right now is real. And it's not going to change the fact that there was an explosion in Beirut and that people are experiencing, I could go on and on with like many, many those are not hypotheticals, but many, many examples is what I'm trying to say. But I am still feeling this and experiencing this right now. But I find that growing up, my entire family, when I was working for large law firms, there were 100 people in line for your job. So you better just shut up and deal with it. Because if you complained, you were out. And even now, I'm surrounded by people who tell me, don't complain, don't feel, don't experience. And so I just feel like I'm not allowed. And again, what Deborah was saying, this permission, right? Like I'm not allowed to be human. And that's really hard sometimes. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sarah just wrote, I couldn't agree more, Susan.
Bless you. Thank you. Maybe I took too long to articulate that.
No, that's great.
I so appreciate everybody listening, but I just want to say, can I complain and can I say no one more time? I'm so frustrated when people say, well, couldn't you just spare half an hour? No, I haven't showered for 3 days. No, I can't. I would like to spend that half hour showering today, if you don't mind. Don't give me a hard time that I can't do one more thing. And don't be upset with me because I'm annoyed with you for asking me 3 times. So.
Thank you. Yeah, Susan, that's exactly right. And what your parents did, it wasn't microaggressions, as you were saying. What came to me was micro gaslighting. It's like, you're not feeling that. That's not important. It wasn't aggressive, but it was enough to disconnect you from your feeling. And I would say so much of the emotional resilience work I do with my clients is getting them back in touch with what they're actually feeling, because so much of us were asked to separate from our feeling at a very early age, because feelings are messy. Feelings are messy, they're complicated, no one's got time for it, keep it moving, right? But the problem with that is, I always say this, that feelings are like angry 3-year-olds. The more you ignore them, the louder they get, right? And so if we do the work up front to be with what we are experiencing and allow it to be okay, no matter what's going on in the world. I so appreciate you tying that in, because I remember myself as a child of like having feelings and then being like, you have it so good, get over it, move along, right? And this idea that it can't be both. Like if we all leave here today, may we leave here knowing that it can be both. We can have our own experience while other people have their experience. And it doesn't have to be, there was a great, I can't remember who said it, but like, this is not a competition of suffering. This is not a competition of suffering. And if someone is suffering, like, our suffering is valid. all suffering is valid. Even if it's minor suffering, it's valid. Now, I think a lot of our fear is getting sucked into the suffering and never coming out. That is different. I'm not talking about over-identifying with the suffering. I'm talking about the mindfulness of suffering, of acknowledging, oh, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm exhausted, I'm hungry, I'm, whatever it is, allowing that to be okay. And what you will find is that in the okayness, it clears up much more quickly than when we just shut the door on whatever it is that we're feeling. This is a beautiful, if anyone has anything else to say on this topic, please either unmute yourself and or write it in the chat box, because this is really the crux of what keeps us from self-compassion, is this idea that we aren't suffering enough to deserve self-compassion, right? But what we know from this is that often, no matter how much we're suffering, if that's our go-to, that we aren't suffering enough to deserve self-compassion, often there's never enough suffering to deserve self-compassion. I'm sure we've all been in some like really intense situations, and even in those situations, we wouldn't give ourselves self-compassion, right? Susan just wrote, exactly, Laura, don't cry, don't express, don't experience emotion, don't be human. Thank you for writing that, Susan, because we're going to talk about a self-compassion break, what Kristen Neff calls a self-compassion break. And the third piece of that self-compassion break is recognizing our humanity and recognizing our common humanity. Because to not be human and to always be cutting ourselves off from our humanity is exhausting. It is a losing battle. It's like, it's like telling a dog not to be a dog. Like, it's not possible. Like, you cannot tell yourself to not be human when all you are is a human being, right? A multifaceted, deeply feeling human being, right? And the work is just learning how to move and function with those feelings. And as I said before, because feelings are so complicated, we're taught very young just to shut them out. Too complicated, too much work, I don't have time to listen, shut it out. But then we notice what this does, for anyone who's ever had to train someone, or who's a manager or a business owner, how does that work when you aren't self-compassionate with yourself? I know in my previous life of training people, I was a jerk. I was a jerk because I just had no patience. I was like, oh, you have a feeling? That's adorable. Keep it moving. But that was because I had no space for myself. And I see in my own life, and I see in my clients' lives, that the more they cultivate self-compassion, the better leaders they are, because the more they're able to be with whatever their employees are going through and be present for the realness of the struggle that so many of us experience on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so again, keep the thoughts and questions coming in the chat box. And unfortunately, the prescriptive oh, Sarah, I love you. Sarah just wrote, and unfortunately, the prescriptive gratitude doesn't help either. Oh, I once wrote a blog post. I think the title was like, "Why Gratitude is Bullshit." I think I might have written that blog post. But what I was writing about is that you cannot get to true gratitude, the type of gratitude where you actually feel in awe of everything around you, which is possible, but you cannot get there until you have fully acknowledged the suffering and the space that you are in. To ignore how you're feeling and go straight to gratitude is what is called a spiritual bypass. You are just going past the hard stuff and trying to smother it with gratitude. And as Sarah just said, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And you can actually feel that, what it feels like in your body to try and, slather gratitude onto a problem without first dealing with the problem. For me, it feels like a lie. Like, maybe I'm the only person who's ever told a lie, but think about what it feels like in your body when you're telling a lie or a white lie or like a little fib, right? It's yucky. It's sticky. I get a little nauseous, right? That's actually what that prescriptive gratitude also feels like to me when I haven't first acknowledged, or when my clients also have not first acknowledged what's really going on. So thank you, Sarah, for naming that. That was beautiful. Okay, so what we're going to get into now is what Dr. Kristen Neff calls the self-compassion break. And this is something that I use a lot in my life and a lot in my client work and in my corporate work and in my circle work. I use it everywhere. I just want to say one thing. Yemi just wrote, that's exactly it. As a millennial, even though we were all coddled, we were never taught the value of experiencing and acknowledging emotions. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Yemi, for sharing that. I really appreciate that. That's right. That's right. And there can be coddling without the acknowledgement of what's yucky, right? All right. So a self-compassion break is 3 parts. And I'm going to take you through these 3 parts right now. So it's going to be a bit like a meditation and a bit like a practice. So if there's anything dinging or buzzing around you, please shut that all down. Oh, and Sarah just wrote, as a Gen X, I appreciate you saying that, Yemi. Yeah. All right. So let's close our eyes. We're going to do this self-compassion break right now. So as a way to get you used to and familiar and comfortable with self-compassion as a practice. So let's just start closing the eyes down. We'll just begin with some big, deep breaths in. So taking a big, deep breath in and letting it out. Breathing in and letting it out. Breathing in, letting it go a little bit longer. And breathing out, getting a little bit deeper and more grounded in the body. And continuing on with this breath, breathing in, lifting up, feeling lighter. Breathing out, grounding down, becoming more present. And continuing on with this cycle of breath in and out, and in and out. And as you do, I want you to pull up a recent experience where you felt frustrated, exhausted, unseen, unheard, unacknowledged, in conflict with yourself or with another. And just pull that up. This is nothing too traumatic or too intense, but just, one of those annoyances, one of those daily annoyances that we have regularly. I just want you to notice what that conflict, whether with yourself or with another person, feels like in your body. Just notice what it feels like in your body and where that conflict or that feeling lives in your body. And really noticing the tension and the hardship in that moment for you. And really making space for that feeling and that sensation. Letting it spread out and take up space as you inhale and exhale. Giving that tension, that tightness, that anger, that angst, frustration, whatever it is, giving it lots of room. And the first thing we do in a self-compassion break when we are experiencing pain or suffering of any kind is we offer ourselves tender touch. So that means taking a hand and placing it either where you feel this tension or placing your hand at the center of your chest over your heart. And just feeling into the pressure of your hand on your body. The hand as presence, an acknowledgement of, oh, this is a hard moment. Feeling that tender touch as comfort. And taking another breath in and moving to the second step, which is mindfulness and acknowledgement of your feelings. Noticing what is it that you're feeling right now in this moment of stress and tension. And saying it, I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling put upon. And then offering words of kind acknowledgement. You can say anything that comes to mind that would feel like kind, that would feel kind and acknowledging. One of the things I like to say to myself is, oh, honey, this is hard. This is hard. I get it. And noticing what happens in that moment of acknowledgement in your body. What happens when you truly acknowledge and see and make space for what's here in a non-judgmental way? Really settling into that feeling of being seen and being understood. And then the third step of the self-compassion break is remembering that we are not alone. So often when we experience pain, we think we are the only ones who are experiencing it. But the truth is that part of being human is being present for pain, being present for suffering. And part of self-compassion is knowing that you are never alone in that, not ever. That as long as you are human, surrounded by other humans, you are not alone in the experience of being human and experiencing pain. And when we know we're not alone, we again begin to soften. We can let go of any sort of self-righteous conversation that we are the only ones experiencing this, or victimization that we're the only ones having this problem. We get to remember that we are part of something so big, so vast, a network that can hold us if we're brave enough to let ourselves be held. On your next inhale, just feeling these three parts, the tender touch, the mindfulness and acknowledgement of your feelings and offering kind words. And then remembering that you're part of something bigger and that you're never alone. Letting these three parts fill your body. Breathing in and filling every single cell of your body. Letting the breath bring self-compassion in and letting self-compassion flow out. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. So what was that like? Feel free to unmute yourself and share what that experience was like in your body. What that was like to actually let self-compassion in. What it was like to maybe feel some resistance for those of us that felt resistance. That's allowed. We are here for all of it. There is no right or wrong here. So what was that like to move through those three parts of self-compassion: tender touch, acknowledgement, and kind words, and then common humanity? I know that for many of my clients, it's a relief. It's a relief to know that they're not alone. Sarah just wrote, "For all the self-help I have done, it felt really new." Oh, thank you. And you know, Sarah, though I would love to take all the credit for that, it's actually, what's interesting is that when we've done a lot of work, sometimes we just need one little thing that kind of cracks open all the other things that we've done. It's like finally all the old things become new things in this one new piece. Lilo just wrote, "For me, it was very relaxing." Yeah. Knowing that I'm part of something bigger and that I'm not alone allows for permission. Yeah. Moving through the resistance was very powerful, says Laura. Yeah. And I felt the neural network. It's a tool that I will add to my resource toolbox. Wonderful, Lola. Yeah. And so one of the things after every call, you have gotten and you will continue to get some journaling questions and a meditation. And this week's meditation is a compassion meditation. So you'll be going deeper with this. And one of the things that I'd love you all to sit with is kind of thinking about how you are feeling now in your body and what it would look like, or how you might respond to a difficult situation from this place, right? Often when we are able to first do a self-compassion break of like, oh, ooh, I'm in the middle of suffering. This is really hard. You know, it doesn't have to be as long as we did it. Quick hand on heart, quick like, oh, this is a moment. Oh, this is real yucky. It's okay. It's okay. I see you. This is hard. I'm not alone, right? We begin to see our actions change because we have created another option, right? And for those of you who didn't just look at the chat box, Olivia put in the survey, which we'll be doing at the end. We have about 9 more minutes, but please, before you get off, fill out the survey. What I love about self-compassion, as I said in the beginning, is that it begins to filter out into different areas of your life. One of my clients, this was so great. She had a very senior level position and was managing a lot of people. And one of the things that we were working on was her short temper. She was very much in this like, stop asking me questions, just go do your work, leave me alone kind of a thing. And it was becoming a problem because the people who were reporting to her were beginning to be scared to enter her office. And instead of, you know, a more traditional coaching scenario might look at, okay, like how can we get you to be better with your employees? But what I love about self-compassion and this kind of shifting is you don't need to worry about how you deal with your employees if you are actually first dealing with yourself and first dealing with your own self-compassion issue or lack of self-compassion. And so what we did is as we built up her self-compassion and her resilience to triggers, I remember she came one day and she was like, I was really nice to people today. I was like, oh, how was that? And she was like, it wasn't hard. And she had talked about how in the past when she had tried to be nice to people, you know, similar to what Sarah was saying about like just hopping to gratitude and it doesn't work. Like just hopping to trying to be nice to people doesn't always work if we haven't yet tended to our own wound. It's actually almost impossible to tend to another person's problem or wound if we haven't tended to ourselves first. And she was saying how not only that day had she been like oddly nice to everyone in the office, she was like, I didn't even have road rage today. She was like, I wasn't upset in traffic. I went to the market. No one pissed me off. Now, it was not like a cosmic day where like no one was in her way. It was how she was showing up. So I'm absolutely thrilled to give you this tool and to stay in contact about how it begins to change your experience, your life as an entrepreneur, and for those of you that have employees and or coworkers, what their experience is as well. Because this is really, really, really big stuff. And I love sharing it with you. Oh, and Lola just wrote, sometimes people are not ready to give or receive gratitude. Absolutely. I mean, everything that we're talking about in these 4 sessions require what Deborah and Susan named, which is permission, like extreme permission. We should, okay, maybe in the future we'll do a whole 4 sessions on permission. Permission is something I definitely talk a lot about in my resilience circles because we don't do anything without it. Permission to be human, please. Absolutely. You have my permission and everyone else's permission here to be human. You can actually, what I want you to say today to everyone in your life, Susan, is like, I'm taking a day to be human. Today is my human day. I'm going to just flood myself with self-compassion. Okay, we have about 5 minutes. Are there any more questions before we leave each other and we'll meet again next week? Again, I want you to be thinking about not only the self-compassion break and those 3 parts that we did today, but also what keeps you from self-compassion, right? Because often the part of us that keeps us from self-compassion also needs to be flooded with self-compassion. Like your itty bitty shitty committee really is just being vigilant because it's freaked out. It's freaked out. It doesn't like change. Our committees don't like change. It likes things to be the way that they are, because that is known and that is safe. So offering your committee some compassion is also helpful. It's like, oh guys, you're freaked out. It's going to be okay. It'll be okay. You feel what you need to feel. It's going to be okay. All right. Are there any questions before we move on? And then, of course, next session is our last, where we'll be talking about widening our circles of care, and what that looks like and what that means, which is how do we take the care that we are offering ourselves and actually move it into our own, our work circle, our home circle, our community circle, the circle of the world. What does that all look like? And that's what I have for you all today.
Jamie, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This is wonderful. It was really great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this session. Sorry I missed the first two that you had, but this was wonderful. I look forward to joining you next week.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. And Jamie, again, on behalf of our community, thank you for sharing your insights and sharing all of your incredible wisdom and knowledge. It is immensely impactful for myself, and I know for so many others. So we're looking forward to having you again next week. Everyone, please join us next Thursday for Jamie's final event of this series. And if you haven't yet, as she mentioned, please fill out the survey that is in the chat. It is really helpful for both Jamie and myself and the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center to have the ability to continue these types of programs. So your feedback actually is what lets us know which programs to make sure we have in front of you week by week. And finally, if anyone is an entrepreneur in business, we have an upcoming webinar next Tuesday, B2B sales and tips and tactics. So that should be really fun as well. Jamie, again, thank you so much for being with us. You're an incredible, wise woman, and I look forward to being with you again next week. Bye now. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.